real pleasure to welcome to the program writer and comedian Adam Conover. He was the creator and the lead of Adam Ruins Everything, and also had a miniseries on Netflix, The G Word. And before Adam, we brought you on, I asked you if you'd been on, because we've been talking about having you on. I literally for like 6-7 years, I feel like. But things move slow here. I apologize for that.
Oh, don't worry. I mean, look at the two of us next to each other. We look like brothers here. This is
you in like 10 or 15 years. Good luck. Good luck to you. But like, I just remember like the learning about why my eyeglasses were so expensive from you. That was just one that like, I was just like, God damn it. Like the great stuff on antitrust and all sorts of public policy questions. I really appreciate the work. And but now you have really inserted yourself into a story, and that is a labor story. We've been covering the writers' strike, Writers Guild of America. The strike is now about a month old. Plus,
yeah, we're in week 5 currently. This is the end of week 5.
Tell us what the scope of the issues are. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but give us a sense of this.
Sure. So the short version is that we're fighting for the survival of film and television writing as a career and a profession. The companies are trying to turn it into gig work, because they're trying to turn us into freelancers who, maybe you get a script a couple times a year, you make a couple $1,000. Meanwhile, you have to go back to driving Uber or, doing whatever odd job you do to make ends meet. That's what they're trying to push us towards in, capital's never-ending quest to reduce how much their labor costs are. And they're doing it in different ways depending on what sector of the business you're talking about. They're pressuring television writers in a different way from film writers. But the overall story is they're trying to eliminate this as a sustainable career, and we're not going to let them, both for our own sakes and for the good of the industry. This is an industry that thrived and creates the most valuable media property in the world, partially because it attracts the best writers and talent in the world, because for a century, this has been the one place that talent could actually get paid. You can't really get paid in journalism. You can't really get paid in novels, but you can get paid in Hollywood. And that's what they're trying to end, and we're not going to let them do that. And so we're out there every day withholding our labor so that, until they remember that we're the people who make the product and they actually need us and they don't have anything without us. They've forgotten that. We're out there reminding them. And as soon as they figure it out, they're going to come back to the table and make a deal with us.
How many writers are in the Writers Guild?
Depends on how you count. Between 10 and 12,000 is the group that's currently on strike. We have a few other smaller bargaining groups that are not on strike right now, such as some news writers for some different networks and things like that. But the film and television group is about 11 to 12,000.
And maybe you don't know this, but I mean, from my own experience, I know how writers work, and it's like, they get a gig and it'll last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or this is the way it used to be, really. And, then they could go months and months and months without a gig. And, part of like the way that worked, I mean, it's a little bit stressful. You make a big chunk of money here, but then you've got to make it last. You don't know how long. And so like, I don't know if you would know this, but is there a number of like, at least how it had been, how many writers are working at any given time? Because it seems to me that like what they're doing is trying to sort of like shorten that window. It used to be 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, shorten that window so they can take a pick in a day here, a day there. And it makes it impossible, even the stress that existed if you're a writer where you work for 6 months and the gig ends and then you got to find another one, you got to wait for the next pilot season or whatever it is. This is going to be impossible to sort of deal with, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the pattern that we're seeing. I mean, the number that you're asking for, I'm sure it exists. I don't have it off the top of my head. What I can tell you is that writers are being asked to do more and more work in less and less of an amount of time. So this will get a little technical, but here's the way that television writing has traditionally worked. We've been protected by norms that are not in our contract that resulted in longer terms of employment like you're talking about. So for instance, the way a traditional television show works is you have writers hired in a writer's room. Then as the writer's room is finishing its work, the show starts shooting, right? And so some of those writers start going to set so that they can give notes. They can work with the actors. Oh, wait, that line didn't make sense when we actually heard it out loud. We need a quick change. We need some alts quickly, et cetera. That sort of thing is very important. Then some of those writers go to post and start editing the show and say, oh, this scene, we don't need this scene. You know what? We can remove this and write a little line of filler dialogue that someone will record in voiceover, right? To plug the gap. And so the result is that, writers, after writing the show for 3 months are then working on the show for another 3 to 4 months and receiving a producer's fee for that. And that, again, that's a pretty good chunk of change that will then tide them over for the maybe 12 or 18 months until their next job, as do residuals, which are very important, right? That is the structure of the business. What the companies have done specifically in television writing is they have destroyed those norms. A lot of what I just listed for you is not literally in our contract. It's just how TV has been made because that's the best way to make TV. What the companies realized is, oh, hold on a second. If we ask the writers to write the whole show before the show's been picked up, before there's even a green light, then there's no shoot for them to go to. So we can just wrap them all the day the writer's room closes, never pay them another cent, and starve them of their producer's fees, which are often like 2/3 of our income. And so we're being asked to do our most valuable work, write an entire season in a compressed amount of time, and then are denied the ability to go to set or to go to post. Instead, they just have one writer do that, the showrunner, and that showrunner is now becoming increasingly overworked because they no longer have all those other writers on set to help them out. Now, that's a little bit technical, but this is something that companies are trying to do to workers in every sphere, right? If you look at what the railroad workers' complaint was when, they were on strike and the Biden administration screwed them, what they were on strike for was precision scheduling, that they were being asked to do more work in less time, that they would only get like 2 or 3 hours off. They'd have to come right back to work, and that they were doing the same amount of work, but they weren't making as much money because the scheduling had been screwed with by the companies, right? If you look at like the retail employee who isn't able to, they have to go in whenever they're called, but their shifts are, the management dribbles out their shifts so they can't make a living. This sort of like creative scheduling, right, is what companies in every sphere are doing. And that's one of the things that we're fighting back against. So one of our very basic asks is that there has to be a writer's room. By the way, the companies are trying to eliminate the writer's room entirely. They're trying to shrink it and eventually kill it. We're saying there has to be a writer's room, and then writers have to be on set and they have to be in post because writing is done in all those steps. And we need to ensure that they're not kicked out of that part of the process and that money isn't taken away from them. But then the point of all this, as you say, is to make sure that writers are able to survive during those gaps between the jobs, because this is still a career where, it takes a long time to get your next job.
I mean, I can attest to, in my experience, having done sitcoms, the rewrites would happen in blocking, in rehearsal, in like on the night of the shoot, you'd do a couple of takes in front of a live audience and you'd switch it around a little bit. And, it's a 22-minute show. 2 or 3 jokes could make the entire episode. And what's interesting about this though, is that like there is a layer of management that is there that it seems to me are not necessarily incentivized to sort of say to the CFOs or wherever this is, the people who are looking at the bottom line, they're not necessarily incentivized to say like, this is going to make the product shittier, because if everybody's under the same constraints, the level of competition will also drop and they're still safe. Like, I mean, it's a weird dynamic as to how this could happen there, because the people who actually know how much this is going to be damaging still don't really have an incentive, as long as it applies to everybody. As long as everybody doesn't have their writers there, the quality of the product will drop, but we're still competing against, the other crappy product at that point, if it was to happen. But let me ask you about artificial intelligence. We just had Alex Perrine on. We didn't have time to get to it. He had written a piece basically saying the AI is not designed to be able to make a creative product. It can maybe do technical writing, but all it is basically just plagiarizing from other things. It can't surprise you in any way in the way that writing is supposed to do. Now, maybe down the road, who knows, 100 years, 50 years or something like this. But I'm not convinced that the executives aren't convinced about that. I'm convinced that they think we can have somebody write up an AI template for a show, and then on Thursday we hire Adam to come in. He does a day of punch up. On Friday we hire, and we don't have to pay them benefits. We don't have to pay big contributions to their union, et cetera, et cetera. Give me how sensitive is the guild to that? Because my experience too with these strikes, the 08 strike and the was it the 09, 08, 09, and
07, 08.
And even in the commercial SAG after strikes, and the producers always seem to have a sense of where things are going, and will make a deal that's good for 2 years ago, but it's going to be a problem 2 years from now.
Well, look, we have an AI proposal that we are demanding that they address. They refuse to address it. And we're doing it for a simple reason. We are not going to let them use AI to undermine our wages and working conditions. Everything you said, by the way, is completely correct. Let's be really specific about what we're talking about, because AI is a marketing term that's designed to make you think that this software can do anything and everything, right? A year and a half ago, we just called it algorithms. We called it code, right? But now they've come up with a marketing term called AI, and there's a lot of hype and a lot of real technology all under that. So what are we talking about specifically? We're talking about large language model generative models, right? These do something very specific. You load a lot of text into them. They output text on the other side that looks like the input text, scrambles it up enough that it looks different, and it is very good at making coherent text that reads as grammatically sound and meaningful in the English language, right? But that's all it does, okay? That's literally all it does. Is it's a word blender, or as I think it's, I like folks who call it a word calculator. You can ask it to do interesting things with words. That is not what a writer does. A writer does not simply output text that resembles text that came before, right? A writer, first of all, we could wax on poetically about the creative spark and all that sort of thing, and coming up with new ideas and drawing from your own experience and putting it on the page. All that stuff is real, but it's a little woo-woo, right? So let's forget about that. It's also not literally what a writer does in film and television, which is the most intensely collaborative creative product on earth. A writer doesn't just output the text. The writer takes a call from the studio head and makes notes, or takes their notes. The writer goes and talks to the director and makes sure the script fits their vision. The writer talks to the actor and makes sure the actor likes the lines. The writer goes to set and observes what's going on and says, actually, if we do it like that, the joke's not going to land because the joke relies on XYZ, this happening on this other scene. We need to make sure, ABC, you've done this work, right? The writer works with the line producer who says, hold on a second, this script is a little bit too expensive. Can we economize on locations, right? It's all this really detailed human to human work and detailed subject specific knowledge that if you were to try to put that into an algorithm, you'd literally have to invent data from Star Trek. And maybe it's going so fast and we're going to get there one day. I'll believe it when I fucking see it, Sam.
Right,
all right?
Right.
Right now, they've invented an algorithm where you put text in one end, you get text out the other end, and it's extremely computationally expensive, and that's all it can do, right? So that's the reality of the situation. However, the CEOs are stupid enough to not understand how the software works, right? And they also don't understand what a writer does. I'm sure you've had plenty of bosses over your life. You know that your boss doesn't actually understand what you do. So I believe that Ted and David and all those guys They believe that all writers do is output text, and they have been told by the hype maniacs who are telling them about generative AI that, oh, we can use this to reduce your labor costs because the technology is going so fast and it'll be AI media, blah, blah, blah. I know that they've drank the Kool-Aid. And so we know that they intend to use this very limited technology to try to undermine our working conditions. And so an example of what they might do is if we don't stop them, is they might say, hey, an AI wrote a great script. Oh, the script is so good, we love it. Now we just need you to go talk to the director, go talk to the actor, go to set, make sure it's all within budget, go to post, take all of our notes. I'm going to call you at 2 a.m. and yell at you because I don't like it and I want you to make changes. Oh, but you didn't write the script. The AI wrote it. You're just the freelancer we hired to punch it up.
Right.
Like that is what we are worried about. We're not going to be hired to babysit an algorithm, okay? And to do all of our work, all the same work we do today, but under, being paid less because they've decided a computer does it. That's, we're not going to allow that to happen. So our proposals are very simple. Sorry, if you had a question, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, and people should understand that within the context of this writer's world, there are very specific, and the WGA at various times will be asked to adjudicate who actually wrote this. Who gets the credit for the story, who gets the credit for the script, are they co-writers? And the scenario you just sort of came up with is exactly what I think they're contemplating. Yeah. And I think they're both wrong. But the problem is the price for their mistake will be paid by the writers, not by them at the end of the day. And if the contract is set up, writers get X, but assistant writers or AI babysitters, they're not writers, so they'll just get this. But in fact, they'll have to come in and do the actual writing. Yep. Where in a different world, the WGA would adjudicate like, no, they were the writer. That's what they were doing. But that's a plan. So what are you guys proposing?
So our proposal, it's a little bit technical because it refers to our contract, but we're proposing that AI cannot be used as source material or literary material. These are definitions in our contract. Source material is anything a writer might adapt, like a novel or another screenplay. Literary material is what a writer produces. That's our work output. That's like, the literal script pages. And so we're saying that we cannot be forced to adapt the work of an AI. And the work of an AI cannot be passed off as the work of a writer. Those are the two basic principles. It doesn't exclude any use of technology from the business entirely, but it does make sure that it cannot be used specifically to undermine our working conditions. And I really believe that in so doing, we're saving the industry from itself, because the fact is people do not want AI content. All right. We work at the highest level. The film and television industry, again, is the most valuable media property on earth, the American film and television industry. And it is the high end, right? People want that experience of paying $15 or $20 to go sit and watch a big budget movie that's a work of art and has the best acting and the best everything else, right? Maybe there's some world where people just want to guzzle down AI chum, right? Maybe there'll be a TikTok successor that's what you look at for 5 minutes before bed. People don't want to spend $15 to go watch that. There's different market segments for a reason. And, we feel that if they allow, AI chum content to overrun the media, the audience is going to rebel, and it's going to destroy what is, frankly, a really good industry, right? It's one of the few industries that actually produces art that people love. A lot of it's bad, a lot of it's very good, right? That makes people feel things. And that's a highly unionized industry where the workers up until now have actually gotten paid. And so we are trying to make sure that does not disappear because of the actions of a few short-sighted, tech-obsessed, idiot CEOs.
All right, let's talk a little bit about like the what's happening in terms of the labor action. I was part of the WGA back in the last strike, and the cohesiveness of that union at that time wasn't anywhere where it appears to be. I haven't written a script in over 10 years now, but the cohesiveness, but just even from the outside, the cohesiveness of that union today seems light years ahead of where it was then. And the solidarity across unions is also feels incredibly different. Like it felt like the writers were you couldn't even convince all the writers that they should be on strike. Some of the more prominent writers, to the extent you heard like writers talking about it publicly, I remember them, I don't want to name any names like Ridley and like there were others who and I know John from way back, but they were coming out and going, there was a little hemming and hawing about it, and we should just get this over with, and never mind like SAG-AFTRA or the Directors Guild seemed to come in and just completely sort of say like, we're not, this is not the same thing, and I think their union came up right after they sort of undercut the writers. It feels like 180 degrees difference now. Like you're hearing about production shooting down because SAG-AFTRA, I know if you're contracted for a gig, you've got to go work that gig, but there's definitely there's gum in the works these days.
Correct.
Will you walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, the Writers Guild is united as we never have been before. And that's
98% with almost like 98% voting. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, 98% in favor of a strike in our strike authorization vote. The solidarity is immense on the picket lines. We have a few, look, I'll be honest, there's always a few, especially in a guild like ours, very well-off members who would prefer to not be in a union, right? And are not always on board. This year they're on board because they know that it's an existential moment for writers. And we are, I'll tell you, as I'm on the board and the negotiating committee, I can tell you from conversations I've had, we are incredibly united.
And we should say that it's doubly amazing because writers generally
don't
like other people. I mean, that's just the bottom line. It's like if your profession is to sit in a room, like the first part of your work product is right. It's because you don't want to be around other people for the most part. Correct. I mean, but on the other hand, we also work together, right? In writers' rooms, we do work together and have that camaraderie, and that has spilled out onto the picket line. But the important thing that you say is that also we have the backing of every other union in town. And that is everyone from the Directors Guild to IATSE, which is the crew union, to Teamsters, which are the truck drivers, even unions like Unite Here, which is the hospitality union here in LA, that represents, really low wage hospitality workers. We are like in solidarity with them. They're in solidarity with us. They've been marching with us because they see that our fight matters to them, and that we're all part of the same broader industry. And a lot of that is because all these workers are feeling the same pressure. SAG-AFTRA actors are being ground down by being forced to do, these really laborious self-tapes for auditions. They're forced to buy their own cameras and hire people to read scenes with them. And then they send the tape in and nobody ever watches it. It's been this cost that has been pushed onto them by the studios. IATSE crew members are being scheduled within an inch of their lives, just like the railroad workers, where they only get 4 or 5 hours off a night, and then they, fall asleep behind the wheel and die. That's a real problem with IATSE members. It keeps going and keeps going. And so you're right. In 2007, I wasn't in the guild then, but I know from history that the guild was a little bit out there and alone, and didn't have that help. And in fact, some of those other unions came out against our strike and said in the press that they didn't support it. This year, they're not just with us, they are helping us. And so one example of that is that we have been shutting down productions all across Los Angeles and also other states. And the way that works is we establish a picket line in front of the entrance to the set. And the other workers in IATSE and the Teamsters, the crew members and the truck drivers, they honor our picket line. They say, I'm not going to cross a picket line. And they walk away, and therefore the show can't shoot. And that would never be possible if those workers didn't respect our picket line. If they didn't say, hold on, the leadership of my union told me we're all in the same boat here. I personally feel that we're all in the same boat because I've been screwed by the companies too. I'm honoring the picket line and walking away and taking that sacrifice on myself. And we're so grateful for them for doing so, because that means that the show's shut down. That means that the companies feel more and more pain because they rented this whole location, all this equipment, and they can't use it. And that means that the strike
end sooner. So yeah, it's a real new day in Hollywood labor, and I think it's part of the wave that's sweeping the entire labor movement. Where by the way, we also have unprecedented support from the public. More Perfect Union took a poll that said, the vast majority of people are on our side, including the majority of Trump voters agree with the Writers Guild strike. And that's because everybody has felt this, right? We're in a situation in this country where we've got practically 0% unemployment. Everybody is working, but nobody can afford rent, because this has happened to every worker in every industry. Everyone has been pushed down to zero. And when folks can't make a living anymore, they get pissed off. And I think that's what you're starting to see around the country. So when you look at Starbucks, Amazon workers unionizing, and the resurgence that we're seeing in Hollywood labor, I think it's all of a piece. It's all the same movement. All
right. Well, Adam, I know you got to get going. I imagine you got a lot of stuff to do. What can, and we should also say, the SAG-AFTRA strike authorization vote is due June 5th. So
yes. And I'm a SAG-AFTRA member as well, by the way. And yes, SAG-AFTRA is also taking a strike authorization vote, which is huge and unprecedented. They haven't done that in 40 years for this contract. So that's a huge deal. And yeah, we're going to find out the results of that on June 5th. And if folks want to help out.
That's what I was going to ask you. How can people help?
If you live in Los Angeles or New York, you are welcome to come down to our picket line. You can go to wgastrike2023.org, I think is the website, or Google it, and it shows you where our picket locations are. As long as you come check in, talk to our strike captains, make sure that you follow the rules and don't cause a ruckus, and just come and picket with us peacefully. If you live anywhere else, if you want to materially support the strike, you can do so by donating to the Entertainment Community Fund. This is a fund that's existed in Hollywood for 100 years to help folks in the industry who are down on their luck. But we have set up a fund specifically to help folks who are affected by the strike, who are not writers, actors, crew members, people like that can apply to this fund for direct financial aid. So if you want to support that fund, you can head to entertainmentcommunityfund.org, click donate, and there's a drop-down menu where you can choose where your donation goes. If you select film and TV, then it'll make sure it'll go to folks who are being affected by the strike. And we've raised in the Writers Guild over $1 million for that fund just from our own members. And I can't even estimate how much, supporters have raised for it, because, we've seen a lot of people do pop-up fundraisers and things like that. The support's been huge. So head to entertainmentcommunityfund.org if you want to support.
Yeah, we'll put links to that at majority.fm. And I know that has been a big reason why people have, to the extent that people have had, they worry about the strike. It is exactly for all the other people that they're working with. They're afraid of them suffering. Adam Conover, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. We'll put links to all that in the podcast and YouTube description today. Real pleasure, and way overdue. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thank you for the solidarity.